Welcome back to another opportunity to learn, grow, and continuing to shed all of the things, all of the thoughts, the worries, the doubts, the fear that is suppressing the brilliance of our core self, the peace of living in our core self, the power that is exuded by living in our core selves, so that we can be more magnetic, so that we can be more attractive, so that we can really begin to consciously create the life that we want to be living, the quality of life that we want to be living, instead of constantly being on autopilot in this reactive state that is not serving us anymore. In speaking directly to that, and what the main mission has been of this channel is healing through anxiety. And anxiety is often just a symptom of being disconnected from this core self, feeling that ungrounded, out of control type nature. It's no wonder that when we are feeling out of control and ungrounded and uncentered, out of alignment, that we're going to feel anxious, because it's like kind of like, where are we, right? We want to be grounded in our own higher self, in our spirit, knowing what we need for ourselves, what we want for ourselves, so we can be grounded here. And so you're probably asking yourself, how do I connect with myself again if I'm anxious right now? And that is a beautiful question. How can I come back to this core power and this peace that is already existent inside me, and it's just being suppressed by all the other shit that I learned over the years that doesn't serve me anymore? That's really the question here. And I have answered this question over the past however many years of my self-development journey. It's been a damn lifetime, maybe 8 if I want to be specified. But one of the biggest realizations that I had, and is the message of this video, one of the biggest realizations that I've had over the course of these past 8 or so years of really diving into understanding myself, is that a lot of the patterns that led me to disconnect with myself and therefore feel anxious were all learned by my parental figures and by the authority figures in my life when I was young. Again, because in these ages, we are extremely vulnerable. We are like a blank canvas, and we just monkey say, monkey do. Monkey say, monkey do. Right? We do exactly as we see when we're children, especially between birth and 5 years old. That's when we're really just retaining anything that we come across. And so, if we're learning from people who have not really dealt with their emotions, might be a little bit more emotionally immature or less self-aware, haven't really done a lot of the work to get out of the grips of anxiety and fear, that type of mindset, well, then that's what we're going to learn. And so one thing that I really recognized here is that not only am I learning from my parental figures, but my parental figures learned from their parental figures. And so what happens here is these patterns are generational if they have not been dealt with, if they have not been shifted. For example, this is a big example. In 2014, when I was going through the depths of my anxiety, like the first most debilitating experience with anxiety when I didn't know what was going on, I went to my mother, naturally, the nurturer, the supporter. I went to my mother for help, right? The one who I really thought could just take it all away. And when I went to her for help, I was met with not much resolve. I was still really anxious even when I went to her for help. And when that happened, I felt even more hopeless. And I felt even more fear that I would not be able to get through it, because I've gone to the person who I thought would be able to help me more than any other person, and they weren't able to help me. And it wasn't until I started reading and I went to therapy and I really started to dive into this healing that I recognized the patterns that were leading me to this disconnection, leading me to the anxiety I was experiencing, were actually the same patterns that my mother has. And so when I went to her for help, it was no wonder that it wasn't helpful for me, because it was just revalidating the patterns and the habits and the core beliefs I was already living in. And the same thing goes for like schooling systems, right? When we are young and we are in school, most schooling systems operate off of the idea that we are all to be taught in the same way, at least when I was in school. And if we didn't learn in the same way, then we were labeled as having some type of learning disability. When in actuality, and you know now, everybody is so unique in the needs that they have, the way that they process life, the way that they learn. Everybody is so unique. And so when we're young, and this happened for me, I was labeled as maybe learning more slowly, having to go to extra tutoring and math classes and reading. When in reality, I just learned a different way. But I disconnected with myself at those ages because I felt so much less than the other people, the other kids, because I was labeled as learning slower. And so that made me disconnect with myself and look about myself more negatively and wanting to be like the other kids instead of honoring my unique way of learning. And so what's happening here is when we could recognize the patterns that are at play, when we could recognize where they came from, this can really help us to move forward, because these realizations for me helped me to have so much more compassion with myself. Because I was able to recognize, wow, like this, I was dealt these cards, it wasn't that I did something that just screwed up my whole life. Rather, I was dealt these cards. It's no wonder that I acted this way if I grew up in this environment when I was a blank canvas. And so as that compassion came in, and as that self-awareness of where these things were coming from began to come in, I was able to look at the patterns that led me to disconnect with myself in a much more objective way. I was able to look at them with space instead of being so identified with them. I could look at them from a macro perspective, looking at them from above instead of being caught up in them. And so I'm really sharing this with you so that you can maybe have a click for yourself where you can recognize, oh my gosh, I can have a lot more compassion with myself and more self-awareness with what I'm currently experiencing, this anxiety that I'm experiencing, so that I can shift into a different consciousness, a different way of thinking, so that I can start to shed and let go of all of those things that I learned, all of the habits that are and patterns that are keeping me from being in my power, in my authentic self. And once we start to shed those things, then our energy starts to raise, because we are letting go of so many energy suckers, right? We're letting go of so many anxious thoughts that are clouding our mind. And so slowly but surely, the clouds start to part and the sun starts to shine through, and we are so much more present with life. We have so much more energy. And this is so beautiful, because once we have this awareness, we then begin to recognize that there is so much power within ourselves, and then begin to recognize that there are so many avenues of healing to get to this place, and they all work differently for each person, because again, we're so unique. Meditation and yoga works so well for me. Cognitive behavioral therapy has worked so well for me. Just verbally processing with a therapist has worked so well for me. Having a support system of people who have done what I'm trying to do and that I feel safe with and supported by, being able to grow with them has been a huge one for me. And just being able to come on YouTube and research different ways to move through anxiety has been so huge for me. And again, this work is extremely courageous, because what you're doing right now just by watching this video is it tells me that you are wanting to do this work for yourself. And not only is that the courageous part, but the fact that you are breaking a line of generational pattern. That's a long line, many, many years of the same pattern that you are now saying, I don't want this for myself, and I don't want this for my kids. Especially if you have kids right now, or if you want to have kids in the future. And this is what really starts to create a new world. Because we become so much happier, so much kinder, so much more loving when we're operating from this place, from knowing what our body needs, knowing what our mind needs, knowing what our heart needs, and being able to listen to that instead of being caught up in what somebody else wants us to do, how somebody else wants us to live. That's where the power comes from. Being able to live from here. And that, again, also is where we start to have our true gifts. The way that we want to live life, the services that we want to provide, whatever type of gifts you hold, then they start to become expressed because you have so much less fogginess, so many less clouds in the way of you being able to truly be present. And if you want to look at more of these videos or do more research on tools that can really help you to heal, I have been putting up a lot of videos that have personally helped me, tools that have helped me on my YouTube channel. But there are so many books and podcasts and articles that you can read, that you can just dive into to understand, ooh, this feels good to me. Let me dive further into that practice. Or no, I don't really like that practice. It doesn't feel good to me. Let me stay away from that. Let me go this direction. It's in here where that peace and that power really starts to exude itself, and we are working through these generational patterns so that we can really start to create a different life for ourselves and start to create a different world for everybody, because when I'm happier, the people around me are happier. When the people around me are happier, I'm happier. Whew. It's a big one. Anyway, if any of this really stood out to you or was provocative to you, you have questions or insights that you came across, let's have a conversation about it. Drop a comment below. Reach out to me on Instagram. We could talk privately. And we could really start to heal even more through this anxiety and come back to that connection with ourselves. Every Sunday morning at 9 a.m., I am holding a beautiful group of people. And it's been great where we just open share after a guided meditation and a centering exercise, 9 a.m. Eastern time every Sunday morning. You can check out the link down below. And I'm also offering coaching now one-on-one if you feel like you want more of a personalized approach to being able to create this life that you have in your mind for yourself and having a personal partner in your success. Otherwise, that link is down below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in these comments, in my messages, being able to have a conversation because we are learning, growing, and evolving together. I'll see you in the next video. Much, much, much love.